welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I am, of course, your host, Rob Burgess. On this, our 96th episode, our guest is D.K. Hamilton. A student of human behavior, D.K. Hamilton is a nationally touring comic, entertaining audiences with his unique, smart, and sardonic takes on pop culture, race, and relationships. Named Funniest Person in Grand Rapids by Grand Rapids Magazine for 2 consecutive years and featured in its March 2013 issue, DK finds humor in examining the things that we secretly believe but are too polite to say out loud. Using his ability to entertain a great variety of audiences without resorting to the lowest common denominator, D.K. Hamilton was entertained at the Detroit Comedy Festival, performed in the Fox 101.3 Brew Ha Ha, competed in Cleveland Comedy Festival, performed in the Limestone Comedy Festival, and performed in Gilda's Laughfest, including being selected to perform twice in Laughfest's Best Show. D.K. Hamilton is featured in the award-winning webseries Lucky J. And now, on to the show.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, how's it going, man?
Going well. How about with you?
Oh, pretty good. Yeah, I was afraid I was going to be late because I was putting the kids to bed, and I...
Oh, no, I totally get it. Totally get it.
So, yeah. But, hey, thanks for coming on the podcast. I've wanted to have you on for a long time.
Hey, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, for people that don't know who you are, go ahead and just introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm D.K. Hamilton. I'm a Midwest comedian. Originally performed in the West Michigan area, but recently moved to Chicago. Just doing stand-up. I write and acted a little bit. I'm in this web series called Lucky J. So...
Yeah, awesome. And I saw you, of course, at the Limestone Comedy Festival, one of the several years I went to that, and you were one of the more memorable comics that I had not heard of before. There's a couple of bits, I won't do your bits or whatever, but there were definitely some lines that have stuck with me through the years. So.
Well, good to know that. What you have to remind Jared. I don't think he's had me back since. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. I've had Matt on the podcast, so I'll tap him. I don't know. We'll do it. But yeah. So I saw you at I think the Comedy Attic is where I saw where you're performing. Yeah. So yeah, is that like that's a pretty intimate club, and not every club is like that. So
no, that's a special place. That place was a lot of fun, and. Among comics, we always talk about what clubs we like, and ones that aren't our favorites. But the Comedy Attic is certainly way, way up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. But so when did you start doing stand up, and when did you know that this was something you wanted to do in public?
Oh, you know what? I wanted to do it. When I first knew what it was, if that makes sense. So when I was younger. I remember in the summer I was allowed to stay up as long as I wanted, and that was the time I started watching like David Letterman, and really fell in love with the art form at that time. And I remember coming to school and telling my teacher I wanted to be a comedian when I grew up, and she didn't know what I was talking about. She didn't even know what a comedian was. She said, and I wasn't allowed to be anything that she'd never heard of. So I do remember that. So then I started doing it for the first time when I was an undergraduate student, and did it for a little while. Ended up going to law school and went that path for a good while. So I came back and started coming to comedy clubs and doing open mics probably about 10 years ago. Yeah, it was about 10 years ago. And, just kept at it and, got to meet people. And one night, now this is not something that typically happens, but I happened to be in this stand-up contest, and it was largely a bringer show. And at that time, I didn't tell anyone, none of my friends, because I figured if I go up there and bomb, at least I don't have to deal with them, rubbing it in later on. And a booker from an agency that handles a lot of the comedy clubs in the Midwest came up to me after my set and said, "Hey, either way, here's my card," and started working for them very, very soon after. So it was within a year of returning to stand up that I was starting to get hosting gigs and other paid spots.
Well, yeah, that's great. So were you stage fright at all? I mean, I've always toyed with the idea of wanting to be a stand-up, but it just seems like a terrifying thing. I mean, I'm a writer, so I just write things, and then I don't have to see the disappointment in people's faces. You know what I mean? So there's a remove there, but you're like, you know very quickly how things are going. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because in between, before I went back to stand-up, I was writing this humor blog. This is back when blogs were, more popular on the internet. And I really enjoyed doing it, but I kind of missed the immediate reaction. So, you write it, you send, you publish it, you start to get some comments in, but you really don't get to see people read it, their reactions. So once I started doing stand-up, I kind of got away from the writing of the blogs, because I was getting that immediate result. So I don't have stage fright so much, although when I went back, I do remember that, I was a lot more stuck with, all right, here's my list, here's what the joke looks like, and didn't really let myself have a lot of space to react. And like a bomb could have gone off in the room and my set would not have changed, right? But then as I got more experience, then I was more present on stage, and I could react to things that were going on, and I'm kind of monitoring the room, and could be flexible, switch up things, try new things, and not be stuck.
Yeah. What do you do when you just bomb and there's no coming back? I mean, what do you do? I mean, that's always the thing that I'm like, oh my gosh. Because it's uncomfortable for me when I'm in a room and the comic is bombing. Like, I don't want them to be bombing. I'm from, like, the audience, like, how can I just steer this so we all go home and in one piece here? And then I feel like the crowd, like, consuming them, and, like, it's like, I just don't want to be here for this.
Yeah, but the crowd, I think most of the crowd is like that. I mean, yeah, there's some people who will get some glee, but I think that most audiences want the comic to do well.
Right, that's why you came there, to see a comedian on stage performing well.
So as far as bombing, I really couldn't tell you. That's never happened.
Oh, wow, okay. Well, at least you're modest.
No, of course not. Right. So talk about being present. Yeah, you're present of a lot of other things that you weren't aware of before during a good set. Like, damn, how much am I sweating right now?
Yeah.
You're very present at the time. Like, how much longer do I have to stand up on this stage?
Right. Yeah.
So, one thing that stands out, I headlined this gig for the Fremont Comedy Festival a few years ago, and this is in Fremont, Michigan. This is where Gerber Baby Food is from, and they have the Baby Food Festival, and so it's all ages, so it's super clean. Now, I'm not not a dirty comic, but there's the difference between all ages and being all clean. Or being clean, just generally in clubs and all ages, right? So people are there with their families. It's broad daylight. This is, July or whatnot. I think the shows are 7. So I knew I had to do at least 45 minutes, but it had to be 45 minutes of the all ages material. So I'm going through my set, and I could feel the part of my set where I typically, is getting to the finish. And, so I'm looking at my watch to see, and I had only been up for 20 minutes. And, so you're in trouble when you have to do crowd work with 7-year-olds. So that's what I was doing to fill out that set.
Wow.
So, but yeah, you're really aware. You're like, oh my, so, and in time, when you're having a good set, it feels like you just got out there. 45 minutes or whatever just goes by very quickly. But when it doesn't, you feel every tick of that work.
I mean, you can't get off before your time is up. You just have to do your time. Right?
Not you want to get paid. No.
Yeah.
I'm like, look, I'm not going to bomb and not get paid, so.
That's right. If you're going to do it, at least get a check for it. So.
That's right.
Not to put a too fine a point on it, but you do talk about race a fair amount in your set, and you are a working comic in the Midwest. You're from Michigan. I'm from Indiana. We know where we are. How is that? Is there friction? Are people receptive? Do people not know how to feel? Because I feel like people feel assaulted if they even have to think about race sometimes.
Yeah, they do. It's interesting. I was saying during the month before the election, people are like, well, Trump can't win. I'm like, look, I've done too many one-nighters in Michigan, rural towns in Indiana or whatever to believe that could happen because, these were the spots. And, I think for the most part, people receive the material well, but things have changed in the last year. And I think some people are more emboldened now. So if you do challenge them on issues of race or politics, something that they don't agree with, they're more likely to be vocal and push back than they were before.
Yeah, for sure. So I passed a huge Trump sign on the work. I worked in Kokomo and I lived in Noblesville, and I drove, an hour straight each way to work. And I passed the biggest Trump signs. I couldn't even told you what a Hillary Clinton sign looked like, and I was still somehow shocked at the outcome. Sure. But you're not the only comedian that I've talked to that was like, yep, we've been in front of a lot of people. We know what this is a real thing. You can't wish this away.
Sure. That's right. Yeah.
So, yeah, but you wanted to talk about something that I thought was interesting, and POCs in genre movies. Now, you mentioned the Star Wars movies. Now, I just should say up front that I have not seen a new Star Wars movie since the prequels. So I've seen the original series and I've seen the prequels, and then I had two kids, and they're not old enough yet, and there we are. So you're going to have to forgive my ignorance a little bit on the subject, but what I was saying to you is that, as I remember, that there was especially in the prequels, a racial component to the different species of alien
species.
Yeah, like Jar Jar Binks was supposed to be a patois, Jamaican guy, and or something like that, and then these other people were supposed to be Jews or something.
The Nemodians, I believe they were, and they had that kind of associated with. I remember earlier movies like 50s, and I wasn't there, but I've seen them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Where characters from Asia had this very particular, way of speaking, and very stereotypical, and generally not even played by actors who were Asian. And we heard those, I believe it was the Nemodians. I'm sure there's some geeks out there who are fellow geeks, I should say, who are loudly yelling at their device right now.
They're already yelling at me for not having seen the last 3 Star Wars movies. So I'm.
but yeah, you listen to this and you're like, wow, this is not good. This is for a movie that at the time was so cutting edge as far as visual effects, and something that people really anticipated, it seemed like a really backward step. But yeah, no, what I find really interesting right now is the reaction to the more recent movies, and it appears to be less on whether people enjoyed the storyline, but and more on, well, this doesn't look like our Star Wars, because look, the last 2 movies or last 3 movies, the lead character was a woman, and now they're throwing the quote is they're forcing diversity down upon us. You have one character who's a stormtrooper, Finn. He's black. He takes off the helmet. There's a black stormtrooper. The internet falls apart. How could this possibly be the case? The other lead character is Latino male. And the people are doing petitions, and they don't even want the movie to exist. There's a petition out there that is asking Disney to strike the movie from continuity. Like Disney's going to do something that they put hundreds of millions of dollars into, and by the way, have received billions of dollars just because someone can't perform anymore because they saw a woman touch a lightsaber.
Oh. Wow, that blows my mind that people would do that. Well, I mean, if those people really want to have that separation, George Lucas is not involved in Star Wars anymore, right? He's no longer has any say over anything. So if they want to draw a line, they can just draw a line for those first 6 movies, and they can just live in that world and not acknowledge this at all. I don't think, why do they need a petition for that? But yeah, it's like any kind of equality feels like oppression, as I think the saying goes.
Yeah, right. And there's a feeling, and I guess it's the part where I say, well, it's not all people, but there certainly is. You hear people boycotting, and there has been, they're showing like on Rotten Tomatoes, while the critics gave The Last Jedi very positive reviews, a few people kind of gained the system, and it appears that the audience reaction was very poor. So, I'm not saying that everybody loved the movie. I'm not even saying that there weren't issues that I had with it, but they're Star Wars movies. They're not exactly the deepest, most philosophical movies out there. It still feels like a lot of this is a reaction to people seeing heroic figures that don't necessarily look like the heroes did in the past.
Yeah, and the other thing that it made me think of was the female Ghostbusters movie, which which I've yet to see, but I'm also not like furious it exists. I'm just like, I haven't gotten around to it yet. It hasn't been super important. I've had other things going on, but I'm not like, I love the original Ghostbusters like everyone did. I had the action figures, but it doesn't.
And it still exists.
Yeah, it doesn't. They're not replacing it like it's not one for one. It's not like they're like, all right, we're having a Ghostbusters burning in the town square tomorrow, and bring your VHS copy from your beloved childhood collection with you.
And they're never ever going to have the original cast come back. It's just not going to happen.
Even if they did, they wouldn't be the same people. This was them 30 years ago. So
yeah, they're older than the ghost.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that
it's not just in that though. So I find it interesting because you see it. All right. Here's why I find it interesting. I've always felt kind of an affinity for geeks because I'm into genre. I still like video games. I still like comic books. And I always felt a sense of kinship with other people who shared those interests. And I felt like we're supposed to be together. And I used to actually even do this bit on stage about why, kind of the people who are super into athletics always make fun of people who like Star Wars, Star Trek, or comic books or whatnot. And I would say why, these are actually, it's joking, but why they're quote unquote better, right? Now, I don't even think I can say that anymore. I really don't. I see the reaction when you see increased diversity and representation in comic books and in video games and whatnot, and the backlash that's coming off, as a result. You would think that a community that was, kind of put upon by others, you're not popular, you like all this stuff, will have a little bit more empathy, but it just sounds like they want to behave in the same way, but they just want other targets.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And yeah, I mean, a lot of the alt-right stuff and the Gamergate, that all came sadly out of that world. And that's not the, like you said, they're the marginalized, or that was the way people thought of it before. The geeks, so nerds, who wants to hang out with them? But you banded together out of self-protection, and you didn't like become Nazis or whatever.
Right. So like one would say, now Star Wars has this political agenda. Well, guess what? Star Wars always had a political agenda.
Of course.
They called them stormtroopers. The bad guys were stormtroopers, literally from Nazi Germany. And people are looking at it at the lens like there's this. I don't even think it's a case of them not wanting there to be a political message. They just don't want that message to be contrary to what they believe. But Star Wars has. Again, it's been, there are a lot of echoes from World War II imagery, particularly with Nazi Germany. Those are the bad guys in the movie.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I mean, let's face it. I've always been more of a Trekkie than a Star Wars person. So Star Trek has been on the forefront of Uhura and Shatner, making history on TV.
Right.
So,
but people, like the new series. Now, I haven't seen any of the Discovery, right? The new series that is out. And the lead character is a black woman. And people are saying that, oh, this is forced diversity. I'm like, really? In Star Trek, which has always had diversity, which has been, pretty much a dismissive statement, which, by the way, exists in a post-capitalist future. You're telling me now that
people always conveniently forget that part of the story, don't they?
they don't even have pockets. That's how anti-capitalist they are. They don't even have pockets. They're like, you don't need to put anything. What
do you need to hide from the group?
That's right.
Share alike in the Federation. Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. Yeah. So, what do you think of the new Star Wars, just in general? Like, do you think it is like an exciting new chapter? Are you into where they're going with it?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. When what was it? The Force Awakens came out. I'm watching them like, this is A New Hope. This is the first Star Wars movie. The story beats were almost the exact same. And a lot of the criticism is, well, this new movie is subverting a lot of the tropes. So it's doing a lot of things that are completely unexpected or contrary to what we have been accustomed to over the last Star Wars. Well, you need to do that. I don't want to keep seeing the same movie over and over again. How many times are we going to have a movie where the climax is the destruction of the Death Star or something very similar to it, right? So, to that end, I think that they've opened themselves up. I'm not going to spoil it. I know you haven't seen it, and I don't know if, all your listeners have, but for the first time, you're coming out of the movie like, well, wow, I don't know where they're going to go next with this.
Well, that's a good feeling. Yeah, I just felt like the prequels were such a step back to me from what originally made the new first movies fresh and exciting and something people hadn't seen before, and it was like going over treading the same ground that we've already been down, and it's like oh wow, isn't it going to be crazy later when this happens? And it's like, get on with it. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've seen those movies. I remember being thoroughly underwhelmed though. So.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen them. Wow, I can't remember. I do remember listening to the director commentary, so I must have bought the DVD or whatever, Phantom Menace. I was listening to George Lucas talk about it, and he was talking about things that are very particular, like, well, here's why stormtroopers bump their heads. Like, okay, who cares about that? Why are you spending so much time worried about stormtroopers bumping their heads? But on the story, he had all the technology, but the thing that I came away from is that trilogy needed a skeptic. It didn't have the Han Solo character or similar character that kind of acknowledged that a lot of the stuff was silly. Right. Han Solo was always commenting on the Force and a lot of the mythos and kind of very skeptical. And so the audience could say, yeah, this is kind of silly, but somebody has voiced that, so let's go along with it. The prequel trilogy was just so self-serious, and there were a lot weirder things, the midichlorians and all this stuff.
Yeah, what happened there? That was, I remember being angry about that.
You needed the character to say, what the hell? What's the story?
Like, I didn't need that. Like, that wasn't necessary. We had the Force, okay? The Force is just the Force, okay? We get it. Like, it's like the thing. Yeah. We don't need the
we'll tell you how that was made.
Right.
Actually, and I'm not even going to try to step. Patton Oswalt had a great bit about that. How he was more interested in, showing you how how the sausage was made.
Right. Yes, I remember that. Yeah. Now that you mention it, but yeah, let's talk about Prince, man, because I really wanted to get into that. This is what I've been looking forward to talking about, because I got to be real honest. Okay, I don't want to come off as someone that I'm not. I was not. I knew who Prince was, and I knew that he was good, and I liked certain things that I'd heard, and this and that, but I wouldn't call myself a Prince fan. And this kind of happened with David Bowie too, for me, because I got kind of sucked in when both of those people died into their back catalogs, and I was like, what have I been doing? I've been wasting my time. This is the thing. This is the stuff. And so I don't want to come off as somebody, because when when a celebrity dies, people always want to be the one that's like, I was, this meant something to me, and it's like, I've been that person before, but with this, it was kind of the reverse almost, because by them dying, it actually gave me a window back into all the things I had missed, and now I'm just catching up on all of it. So I've been immersed in it, and it's all happening to me for the first time, and so but I'm sure that you probably, I'm guessing, had more of a real connection to it before he died.
Oh yeah, I went through this in real time. I mean,
yeah.
So like his career, I can't. There are a lot of people like, well, I was there with his first album, which came out in '78. I wasn't quite there. Where I had my first exposure to Prince was '79. I had this older cousin. He was 4 years older, but we'd hang out, and sometimes he'd come over to the house, and he would bring music. He always had new music with him, and he had the single for "I Want to Be Your Lover," which was Prince's first hit, and he left it. He forgot to pack it up when he left. So I had, and I probably wore that thing down. I wore those vinyl grooves down to nothing. So I was in the perfect age. I think pop culture wise, I always think that people are really most attached to whatever they liked when they were like 13 or 14.
Oh yeah, I definitely think that's true.
Right. So Purple Rain came out when I was 14.
Wow.
And there was a period of time where I bought the new Prince release back when you actually had to go to a store to buy a full release on the day it came out. And I remember very clearly riding my bike up to Musicland at the mall and coming back with the vinyl album for Purple Rain and listening to it for the first time, and the opening refrain to "Let's Go Crazy," where you're like, there's that hymnal kind of preacher thing at the beginning. You're like, where's he going with that? And then the kick drum comes in, and the main riff. And this was at a time where every Prince album that came out, and I had 1999, which is my favorite Prince album. That was the one that came out before Purple Rain. Very cold, very electronic. You can hear some of that in like Darling Nikki and Purple Rain and Computer Blue to a certain extent. But every album was a departure over the one before it, right? So Purple Rain, I had worn down all of the 1999 songs and all the B-sides that were for the singles there. I had all of that. So here was this new album, and the movie was coming out that summer. And it was, I was just obsessed at the time. I had Prince posters, probably worried my poor father to death. I didn't have pictures of women in bikinis or whatever. I had a picture of Prince in bikinis on that wall. But yeah, so and ever since then, so up to this day, and I, my social media, I would talk about Prince so much so that when he died, I had people that I really didn't even know checking in to see if I was okay. And my father had died like 3 years before that. Didn't get that same reaction. Check up, but yeah, I was I saw the Purple Rain tour, and I saw him in concert many other times after that.
Really? Wow,
every
you're lucky.
Year. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a period of time where every year he had a new album, and there I was. Even when he didn't have a new album, when he had a single out, there was generally an unreleased song as a B-side that no one had heard of. And yeah, it's just something that I kept with me, that I never really stopped being into it, right? So there were other artists that I liked at the time, but it's just, you don't. But Prince was really, it's kind of a cliche, it was the soundtrack of my life. So I could pull an album out or listen to it. I remember exactly where I was in my life when that came out, because whenever it was, I was wearing it out.
Yeah, well, I mean that's probably good though that you got so much Prince while it was happening, because I love it's a love-hate relationship I have with how I do this, because I feel like I always do this. I always hear about somebody died, and then I'll do one thing, and then of course I'll get obsessed, and then I'll I have to know everything, and I have to listen to everything, and then I'm like, but I'd spent so long doing that. By the time the next person died, I've already wasted all my time listening to the last person that died, and I haven't listened to anything new, not appreciating the people that are still here. So I feel like I'm now in this cycle of like constantly playing catch up, and it's like, man, there's so much I just don't know and haven't heard, and I want to get as much as I can, but it feels like so much. But anyway, that's just my experience of it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of an artist that has as much material, officially released and still unreleased as Prince.
Oh yeah.
So you know, there's plenty of
oh my gosh
music out there that you have to discover, which is kind of why, when he died and people started talking about the unreleased songs, they were like, oh wow, we're going to be able to hear, Prince songs that we've never heard before. I said, you know what, if you really want to hear Prince songs you haven't heard before, listen to the last 20 albums. Because most people haven't heard them.
No, absolutely not.
They're not getting any airplay. And there's plenty of stuff out there that you can, still get your hands on. There's really solid stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've been, our social media betrays this. I've been critical of a lot of his older stuff, but then I kind of realized that, I'm never going to be 14 again. Mm-hmm. I'm never going to have that same connection with that new music, but I, generally enjoyed it. And I thought a lot of good material that came out in the years right before his death were, he was putting out some tremendous stuff.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I just think it like flowed out of him at an uncontrollable rate, and I don't know. How did you feel about that? Like, you talked a little bit about the backlog, and of course he had that big controversy where he wrote "slave" on his cheek.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure you remember.
I remember because people, like I was responsible for him. Like, yeah, what's up with your boy?
But he was like very protective, and he wouldn't like you couldn't find a lot of his. That was one thing when Prince died. I wanted to go listen to some Prince songs, and now of course YouTube is choked with Prince material. But like the day that he died, it was empty. Like there was nothing. There was like one or two things on a cell phone. That was it. It was pretty spare, and that kind of speaks to he was very protective of his work, even though he produced a lot of it. Like they were saying after he died. I kind of can't believe he didn't have a will. That kind of blows my mind. I don't know. It seems like somebody that thought about his legacy that much would have a will. So I don't know. That always seemed weird to me. But
here's the thing. Here's why I think he didn't have a will. I don't think he thought he was ever going to die. and I don't mean that to say I don't think I'm going to die for 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, I don't think he ever thought he was going to die. So why get a will?
Yeah, I can see what you're saying.
Because he said, for a while, he said, I don't count birthdays anymore. Now, he did have this religious conversion and became a Jehovah's Witness, so he didn't celebrate birthdays. But he said he didn't count them because he thought that they were a trap, that if you start counting your years, you would get older. Mm-hmm. So I think that he had this belief that he would only die if he ever considered that he was going to die.
Yeah.
But he didn't.
Yeah. And I mean, at the same time, people that are that special, I mean, why wouldn't they think they have like magical powers or something? I mean, if you did something like he did in his life, just rose out of nothing to become the greatest guitar player, greatest musician, greatest songwriter, greatest performer ever. What couldn't you do? I mean, if you can do that, I mean, it would. So
there's stories out there where people claim that he can levitate. They were like, to the extent that anything good has happened since his death is that people are now talking more.
Yeah, right.
They didn't speak with you, and the funniest stories come out. And I can't remember who it was, but someone said at the party that they swear they turned around and Prince was levitating. And I gotta say, can't rule it out.
No, absolutely. You'd be a fool to rule it out. I mean, have you heard him play guitar? But
oh yeah, tell me about it. And what I hear is that's not even. I've heard people say that piano was actually the best instrument that he played, and I'm thinking, wow, he's better at piano than he was at guitar. Jeez,
Yeah. There's an interesting one I found that it was recorded right near his first album, but it was just like an instrumental jazz album he performed with like two other people that were in his band, and it was like just improvised. And how many other things like that are there out there? I mean, that would like be the best thing some people ever produced if that was like an actual album. Yeah, but that's just a tossed away. Who cares? You know, like the extra prints. Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's like, hey, let's do this. And I think it was. I don't know if you're talking about the Rebels project, but there was. Yeah, he did have this kind of. Hey, he always wanted to perform more than just as himself. I think he knew that was a way that he can get more product out. So, yeah, he had. There's a ton of these projects that were never released, and some have. I don't know if you're familiar with Madhouse.
I've heard the name.
Okay, so Madhouse was a band that he had. It was right around the time the Sign of the Times came out, so this is 87.
Okay.
And it's all instrumental, and it's this like jazz funk fusion thing. Mm-hmm. And I remember buying it. I didn't even know that he was on it. It was not in the credits. I knew it was on his label, which at that time was good enough for me. If it was on his label, I was going to buy it. Mm-hmm. And this was literally months after Sign of the Times came out, which I believe is his best album. I distinguished that from 1999, which is my favorite album. Mm-hmm. That was a double album cut down from a triple album. Mm. Yet that same year, he put out this jazz album, jazz funk album, under the name Madhouse. And you know, didn't really he didn't promote it as being associated with him. But it was a totally different side. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Now that stuff is harder to find. The stuff that was on his label has been out of print for a very long time. But yeah, you can get on YouTube and some other places now, and find that the lawyers aren't quite as aggressive as they were.
I think he had an army of lawyers.
Absolutely. Yeah,
for sure. It's the Loring Park Sessions is what I was thinking of. Loring.
Oh, sure. Yep.
So, yep. Yeah. So, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's just amazing how much he produced, and for other people too, because you know, I'm sure you had a lot of Morris Day and the Time albums if you had Prince albums, right?
Oh, absolutely. So, and I remember not even knowing. I remember getting into arguments with friends over which group was better, Prince's group or the Time. And then, of course, all the recorded stuff, it was the same. It was Prince. It was on both.
Who do you think wrote Cool? Come on, really?
That's right. And you can hear him. I mean, that's the thing. If you listen to the Time song, you can hear Prince singing. Mm-hmm. You know? Because a lot of times Morris just sang over a guide track, and, you can still hear Prince's voice a little bit lower in the mix. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but,
absolutely.
Yeah, listen to that, and at the time I was believing everything that came out. He used to say that there was this other person. He had a lot of alter egos, and it was Jamie Starr. Jamie Starr was supposed to be this older man that was the mastermind behind the Time and Vanity Six and a lot of other groups. It was good, but they would interview people. What's Jamie Starr like? Oh, he's this cool little dude. He's this old dude. And,
what is this, like Tony Clifton or something?
It's like Tony Clifton, right? It was this other alter ego. You can actually hear his voice in some of the things. And there's some videos out there where he's actually dressed up. Actually, there's this video called Come On, and it was off of the New Power Soul album. Okay. And it's actually him in the character of Jamie Starr. So. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, he played
really down the rabbit hole.
What's that?
I said we're really down the rabbit hole.
Oh, we are. That's okay. This is for the real fans anyway. Yeah, this is interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to go back over someone's life and see all the different personas that they played, because I felt like he integrated well into what was happening. He embraced rap, if ever so awkwardly at certain points. He tried to keep up with what was happening, and he tried to put it through his, thing. There's a very obscure New Power Generation album that I don't know if you've heard of called Gold and
N-word?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. It's actually, it's good. It's Prince. It's good. It's definitely him trying to take the, I don't know what he's doing there exactly, but it's something he tried.
Slash, it's like the soundtrack for a blaxploitation movie that never was made.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's very cinematic. It's very,
Yeah.
he tries a lot there. I appreciate it. But yeah, he went through a lot of different iterations. I felt like at the end I appreciated his later work, honestly, because I felt like he kind of got back to, what he did best, and I felt like he was more comfortable with what he was doing. I felt like starting with, I love this song. I always bump this song, but My Name is Prince. That was definitely of its time in a certain way. In retrospect, it's a little. I don't want to say dated because that's pejorative, but it's you can tell exactly what year it was made.
But that's off a very solid album.
Absolutely, that's a great album. This is the Simple album, yeah. So
and people were. This is the really bad thing. One of the not the really bad thing. The fact that he died was a bad thing. But if I hear Purple Rain one more time, I might have to take a hostage. And it's like, there's so much other music, but everyone was just harping on not only the Purple Rain song, but certainly the Purple Rain album. But I would put, I've already said Sign Times is the best,
right?
And 1999 is my favorite. Purple Rain is probably top 5 for me. But I think that the Symbol album is certainly up there. I think the Gold Experience, I don't think that's in print anymore, but that's a really solid album.
What about the Black album? I've heard a lot about it, but I've never delved into it.
I bought the Black album was the first bootleg Prince album that I ever bought.
The first, but not the last.
Oh no, not by one. So this is 1987, and 88. Excuse me, it was supposed to come out in 1988. He stopped the presses on it, like right when it was about to come out. There had already been some printings, and it was going out. He was like, "No, stop this." The story is that he had a bad ecstasy trip, which it always shocked me because one of the things I really liked about Prince is he was always anti-drug. Everything else he was, being a geeky kid, I thought that was kind of cool, right? And then when I heard that he had this ecstasy trip, that was the first time. I guess in hindsight, given how he died, it's kind of ironic, but he had this bad trip. He told Warner Brothers not to release it. He records a totally different, not totally different. There's one song that's on both. But otherwise, a different album, Love Sexy, that he put together in a matter of months. And, the Black album was actually supposed to be out 6 months after Sign of the Times, which, again, a double album. And it was in reaction to, people feeling that he had gotten away from his black funk type roots, which, he kind of did. I grew up in Detroit. Detroit was one of the first markets to really adopt Prince and play his stuff, and not just the singles, but the album cuts. And I remember, this was a time where, he still had a large black audience, the Purple Rain, and then the next album comes out, and the first song off of it is Raspberry Beret.
That had to be a difficult day for you.
Yeah. So I mean, a little bit, right? So it was different. Like I said, every album was different.
Yeah.
And the black radio station was like, we can't do anything like this. He's dressed up in clouds. He's got violins and what is this?
Right.
So he had that. He had the album Parade, and he really got away very much from the funk roots. And this was his way of saying, look, I can still do this. Anyway, so once I found out that this album was made but not released, I had to have it. So back in the days where we still have independent music stores, but I'm, at this store and they have this thing behind the counter. We've got the Black album, and it was on cassette.
Oh,
I remember it was wrapped up in this black crepe paper, and it was $30.
Wow!
I remember.
Wow!
This is 1988, so $30 is $70 now.
Sure.
And I'm in my second year of college. So this is not, a small sum of money. and I got it, and it was probably more important that I had and other people didn't than the
contents of the cassette, right?
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I had it for years. Now they did ultimately release it.
Mm-hmm.
They released it at the end when he was trying to get, he was finishing up his deal with Warner Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
But it was funny to me because I remember Gary Graff. Gary Graff wrote for the Detroit Free Press. He's a music critic. And I remember when Love Sexy came out, he was critical of Love Sexy, but he said, the album he should have released was the Black Album. That was a great album, this, that, and the other. When the album finally came out, Gary Graff did a review of it, and he didn't like it. I almost think it was because it was so rare and unheard of.
Uh-huh.
But, that was part of the mystique of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I mean, the quickest way to make me want something is to be like, no, you can't have this.
You can't have
oh, well, okay, now I gotta have it. So.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, what did you think of his apparent hyper-religiosity? I kind of compare it to Bob Dylan had a period where he was a born-again Christian, but I mean, this was pretty much his whole life. I mean, he grew up in the church, right? He grew up, what did he went from one pretty extreme religion to the next, right? I mean,
yeah. He grew up here. His family, they were Seventh-day Adventists.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know a whole lot about that.
I don't either. Yeah.
Although my grandfather was one, so I should probably know a little bit. Other than their Sabbath is Saturday. That's
yes, yeah. And I only know that because there's one in between the Starbucks in my house, and on Saturday mornings it's always full, and I always make note of that.
Right. So, but yeah, you're right. It's always been a thread. In fact, his first album is For You, and the lead-off song on that is this a cappella piece that kind of predates Bohemian Rhapsody. I think it was. Check me on that. It's around the same time, but to the extent that he had all this multi-track vocals, this was the first thing that anyone who bought the first album has heard, and it was dedicated to God. And all of his albums were dedicated to God, and it was a really accessible God, if that makes any sense, because he was very much into acceptance. So it was acceptance, it was you go back to the song Uptown and Dirty, my white, black, Puerto Rican, everybody out, just a freaking. And it was this acceptance that he talked about, how people perceived his sexual orientation. And although he said that he wasn't gay, he never implied that there was anything wrong with being gay. It's just that wasn't him. And, Wendy and Lisa, and incorporating that, their relationship into the group, it was this very love-focused, non-judgmental God. And I'm not religious at all, but that's something that did kind of appeal to me. That if this is the way we're going to go, this sounds good. But sometime, and as it really happened after the death of his child, he got hooked up with Larry Graham.
Yes, uncle of Drake, right?
Oh, that's right. Uncle of Drake, and bassist for the
amazing bass player, by the way, just amazing.
Oh yeah, just totally established the slap bass.
Flea owes him quite a lot.
Yeah, so he was the one that introduced him to the Jehovah's Witness religion, and he stayed with that, and it had significant effects on his life, including, at least in my opinion, some of the circumstances leading up to his death. And, I want to be careful, I'm not blaming Jehovah's Witnesses, but I think that, given some restrictions that they have on blood transfusions, he did, he all of that dancing and all of the, if you go back and look at his video, there's a YouTube clip of him just doing the splits.
Oh.
Like him doing splits on all these different things. Yeah. And his hips turned to powder.
Of course they did. Well, yeah, anybody's would. That many times, yeah.
Yeah, and I had heard stories that he needed a hip replacement but was unable to get it, given the restriction on blood transfusions. And I don't know, I'm probably talking way out of what actually happened, but
that's
his pain, that was the reason. He was coping with pain, and he was, medicating to try to deal with that. They said on some days he could barely walk. You did see him with canes in the later years, more than just the affectation, but actual need. And then where you really knew was something right, he stopped wearing heels. And I noticed that he wore like the Trump platform, but he wore heels. So anyway, maybe that's a little unfair, but I think that if he had treated that pain or had the surgeries. I heard Morris Day had to have hip replacement, and you can't compare the moves of those two.
I mean, he still moved around, but Prince was like a gymnast of some sort.
Yeah. Well, all of Morris Day's dances were for people who didn't know how to dance.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they're just they seem like pretty simple moves. Yeah, exactly.
Well, one of his dances was called the Oak Tree.
Yeah, you're right.
He named a dance after an invisible object that kind of gives you.
Yeah, exactly. It's why the rest of the time could do the dances while playing their instruments. That's right. Yeah, you couldn't do a lot of what Prince did with anything in your hands. So.
No, and that's it's just I came up and it was kind of like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. You could like one, but you couldn't like both. Right? With Michael Jackson and Prince, that was the big rivalry.
Yeah. Well, how did you feel about Michael Jackson at the time? Could you not like Michael Jackson because you liked Prince? Had you chosen a side?
I was philosophically incapable of liking
really?
Michael Jackson.
Wow.
Because this is, it was...
Because I would say I had more of a connection to Michael Jackson before he died than I had to Prince before he died. And I've definitely, my appreciation, of course, for Prince has only increased over time. And I've kind of, nothing against Michael Jackson other than the obvious things. But musically, there's nothing wrong with what he did. It just doesn't have the same, I don't find myself revisiting and be like, how did they do this? But Prince, I'm obviously always doing that. But before Michaal Jackson, I definitely had a connection to Michael Jackson before he died.
Oh, yeah. So. No, it was you couldn't be on both teams. That was kind of how it was. And I remember, getting these huge arguments at school.
Really?
And the only way that we ever were able to walk away is with an agreement that Prince was the better musician, was the better entertainer. And I look back now, and I don't think I would necessarily concede that now. There's this clip on YouTube. It's actually a medley. He's doing a medley of songs off of the Gold Experience.
Okay.
And he's lip syncing. All right. And he Prince didn't lip sync and didn't like to lip sync. And his way of kind of needling the show was he was chewing gum. Okay. So he's chewing gum. The show, this is lip syncing, and I'm not even going to try to fool you, but my point is, this is, if you look on this performance, and I want to say it's the American Music Awards, he's doing this choreographed dance routine, kind of, what Michael Jackson typically does, but because he's not singing and he's not playing an instrument, his moves are phenomenal, and I would put that up against any performance that Michael Jackson did. And it was almost him saying, "Oh, if this is what you want me to do, not only could I do it, but I'm going to do it while I'm chewing gum."
Right.
Because it means nothing.
Exactly.
So, I look back on that and I'm like, wow, yeah, he could have. The only thing I say he couldn't do, he couldn't act.
Okay, now you talk about the rabbit hole. Let's go a little further down. So there was a movie after Purple Rain called
Under the Cherry Moon.
Okay, tell me about that movie.
Okay, so So people said, Purple Rain was great. The best part of Purple Rain were the concert performances. So Prince decided he's going to do a totally different movie.
Oh, no.
He's not going to perform in the movie. He's going to act. And by the way, he's going to direct the movie.
Oh, boy.
He decided to direct the movie and convince Warner Brothers somehow to release the movie in black and white.
Wow. What?
It's a beautiful looking movie. It's a completely ridiculous movie. So he plays this gigolo in South France.
Okay.
Who falls in love with a woman who is she's an heiress, and she has this arranged marriage, and she's played by Kristen Scott Thomas, who went on to actually be pretty notable actress, and I believe she won an Academy Award. Certainly not for Under the Cherry. And it was. It's ridiculous. I still see it every now and then. It's one of those kind of train wreck movies, and it's one of those. It's bad, but it's like funny bad.
That's good.
So that was one thing he couldn't do. There was a sequel to Purple Rain, Graffiti Bridge, that looked like it cost like all of $10 to make. It was all done on the sound stage. The best movie that he's ever made is Sign of the Times, and that's because it's a concert movie. Right? But okay, so here's where I had to qualify the statement again. He was on The New Girl.
I've heard about this. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I know he was on an episode of that, right?
He was on the episode of The New Girl, and he was great.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was he was natural. I mean, he was playing himself, which I understand is more difficult than it looks. He was funny, and yeah, it's kind of sad that maybe if he had lived longer, he would have had more opportunities to do more of that. And I think maybe if he wasn't central, I mean, it's kind of hard to say because he's so distinctive looking. It's hard, what kind of movie are you going to put him in? But,
yeah, I don't know. He's not going to be like Daniel Day-Lewis or something. You're always going to know it's like Prince. He's not going to melt into the role or whatever.
Wow, Prince really disappeared in that role.
Yeah, exactly.
He could either play Prince or an alien.
Well, I mean, he was a 5-foot sprite with butterfly wings on his back, but other than that, he was totally believable as the oil magnate from the 1800s or whatever.
That's right. Who should we get to play Abraham Lincoln? I got a wild thought on this. Why don't we go with Prince? Right?
The stovepipe hat is like 6 feet tall.
That's right.
Well, so what is your top? If you had to say your top 5 Prince songs ever?
Okay.
Let's just break it down. I mean, what is it?
All right, my favorite song by Prince is a song called "She's Always in My Hair."
Okay, I've heard that one.
It's a B song, right? Mm-hmm. It's not on any. Well, I shouldn't say it's not on any album. It's actually on his the compilation, the hits and the B-sides on the B-sides album. Mm-hmm. It was the B-side to Raspberry Beret. Mm-hmm. All right, so that's my favorite, but the others in no particular order. There's a song, also a B-side, is the B-side of, I want to say Little Red Corvette. It might be 1999. Called How Come You Don't Call Me Anymore. And it's a song where Prince is just playing the piano. There's no drums. There's nothing else. He's playing the piano. And amazing song. I encourage people to listen to that. Off the 1999 album, Lady Cab Driver. Tremendous song, probably an 8-minute song. This was at a time where he had these very long, very drawn out funk workouts. And Lady Cab Driver, soundtrack of my life, got to be on there. Computer Blue off of Purple.
Yeah, that's a great song.
Right, and that has been kind of a unicorn song for me because there's a scene in Purple Rain where he walks in, he's late for rehearsal, and Wendy and
Lisa.
She's not Wendy and Lisa. Wendy and Lisa aren't there, but the rest of the band is, and they're playing the song, this funk workout song, and it's part of an extended version of Computer Blue. So I always knew it was out there, and I was waiting to be able to get it because at the time he used to have a single cut, but then he would have an extended version of a lot of his songs. Like there's a 10-minute version of Let's Go Crazy. Right? And I was waiting for the full version of Computer Blue. It did not come out, and I was unable to find it anywhere until after he died. It leaked, and then now it's on the re-release. And it's just, oh man, every time I hear that song, it's like the first time. I always hear something different.
Yeah.
So I think I'm one song short. Okay, so if I go for one more, there's a song off the Gold Experience called Dolphin. And you can find it on YouTube. He performed the song on David Letterman, David Letterman show.
Awesome.
My 5.
That's a pretty good 5. I don't feel qualified to give 5, but I will say that songs that have grown on me over time. There's a version of "Let's Go Crazy" he did with Third Eye Girl, which is his last group, that I really was into. I really like that one. I also love the song off Sign of the Times, "America." And there's a great live version where he plays the drums. And it's so cool. And I don't have 3 more because I don't know how I'd pick, and I'm not nearly through his discography. But yeah, those are some of the ones that I've really been into lately. But
well, if any, okay, I have to say this, not to be the actually guy, but just in case there's another hardcore Prince fan, America's off Around the World in a Day.
Oh no, I knew I'd do something like that.
And there's a 25-minute version.
Ooh.
Because it was a single, and then like I said, he has these extended version. And it's at least 25 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm gonna find that one. Okay. Wow. I feel like I really screwed the mooch on that one. Wow.
Well, no, I didn't. If it was just you and me, just talking, I wouldn't just say anything.
But since this is for broadcast purposes, we need to set the record straight.
Because I've read like a ton of books on Prince.
Oh.
And half the time I'm like, nope, that's not right.
See, I've thought about writing a book about Prince, but then I'm like, there's got to be someone else that's better qualified to do this than I am. Yeah. So, well, I'm sure I'll do a couple more months research, and I'll have more to talk about. But that's cool that you were there from the beginning, because you've had more time to think about Prince, and I always want more time to think about Prince, basically.
Yeah, but you get to discover so much more.
Yeah. I guess that's the thing. I've never seen The Wire either, and everyone scoffs at me.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, but in a certain way, it's good because I still get to see it with fresh eyes, assuming that Trump doesn't blow up the world or whatever.
I just want Black Panther to come out. And then if I could do that, then we're good. I had a good run.
Not to get too deep off into the woods into that, but have you read the Ta-Nehisi Coates comic books of that?
I have. Yeah.
Are they good?
Yeah. You know what? It's not bad. My favorite Black Panther run is it was by this writer named Christopher Priest. And he really kind of rebooted the character. Black Panther was, he was in the 80s. He really wasn't published. He debuted in the 60s and had his own series in the 70s. But there was a long period of time, and because he wasn't a prominent character, that really gave the writer a lot of room to make it his own. It's not like the X-Men or Spider-Man where so many, sales were dependent upon it being this very particular version. And actually, the movie is based a lot on the work that writer did. So, I'm happy that, not just Ta-Nehisi Coates, but Roxanne Gay, she wrote.
Oh, did she? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, just recently.
Cool.
So it's good to see these, prominent Black fakers who are, expressing themselves through, the comic art form.
Yeah, and it kind of shows it's not lowbrow necessarily. It's not, like in Ta-Nehisi Coates, I can't think of a more distinguished writer working today than him. And the fact that he's willing to put his name to something like this shows that it's it's all the hero's journey. It's all Joseph Campbell. You know what I mean? It's all the same thing.
It brings us back to Star Wars. It's all the
exactly. Bring it back to Star Wars. Yeah, precisely. So yeah, you think George Lucas made up the call to action or whatever at the beginning of that cycle or whatever? So
right, it's all there.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
If you use it as kind of the outline. Okay, here's what my story needs to have, and there it is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, thanks for talking to me. It's been a lot of fun, and let's do it again real soon because I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about. So.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, this has been great. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything you want to plug before we go? Any dates or anything happening that you want to?
Yeah, you know what? I'm in Gilda's Laughfest in March 16th. I'm doing a show with this group called the Laugh Riot Dolls. They're a group of women comedians who are just outstanding, and I was invited to come back. I thanked the organizer. Said, "Well, thank you for thinking of me." She reminded me that we had worked together to get them on the on the Laughfest lineup. So I get to come back and hang out with them. And this is in Grand Rapids, Michigan, March 16th. But Laughfest 10-day comedy festival. John Mulaney's there this year. I'm trying to think of, I think Jim Norton. But yeah, check it out. It's Gilda's Laughfest. Not only is it a 10-day comedy fest with nationally touring comics, but it also raises money for Gilda's house, named after Gilda Radner, and it provides like brief supporting services for families of people with cancer. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome, cool. Well, and also follow him on Twitter because he's a lot of fun. He's got you don't tweet that often. When you do, it's worth it. It's like, you know.
I call my shots. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
At DK Hamilton Comedian. I will say, you know, before the election, I wasn't super political, but now I feel like, you know, I kind of have to be.
I mean, yeah. So if you're a human in 2018, it's kind of required. So,
yeah. So if you're a Trump supporter, you're not going to like the site. You're not going to like it, but it's cool. Block me. Don't listen to me. Don't follow me. Just don't add.
Not interested in the comments.
My tweet feed is not a First Amendment zone.
Not allowed. Awesome. Cool. Well, hey, you have a good rest of your night, and I'll talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
If you enjoy this podcast, there are several ways to support it. Join the Rob Burgess Show mailing list. Go to tinyletter.com/The Rob Burgess Show and type in your email address. Then respond to the automatic message. I have a Patreon account, which can be found at patreon.com/Rob Burgess Show Patreon. I hope you'll consider supporting in any amount. Also, please make sure to comment, follow, like, subscribe, share, rate, and review everywhere the podcast is available, including iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Facebook, Twitter, Internet Archive, TuneIn, and RSS. The official website for the podcast is www.therobburgessshow.com. You can find out more about me by visiting my website, www.thisburgess.com. And if you have something to say, record a voice memo on your smartphone and send it to therobburgessshow@gmail.com. Include voice memo in the subject line of the email. Until next time.